Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today will be part 2 of our discussion of Chapter 9 of Whither Are We Traveling, Bread or Stone?
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have our 3/4 of our usual host of hosts. I'm Matt Appel, and I'm a Mason in Mill Creek Lodge number 243 here in Montlake Terrace, Washington. We also have Worshipful Brother Jarrod Dunham from Penticton number 147 in Penticton, British Columbia, and Very Worshipful Brother David Colbeth from King Solomon number 60 in Auburn, Washington. And we wanted to keep talking last time, but our time was up, so we're back to talking about Masonic education in the context of this paper. And I'm gonna start this time because I'm already talking. So nanny boo boo. I one of the things that spoke to me, he talks about is in the first section 1, part 3. Our architects are too amateurish, and having people. While I agree that it is it is an important thing that to learn to talk about something, you learn about the something. So, like someone. I think David was saying earlier, to have an apprentice pick some stuff and learn about it and then relate it to the lodge is an important way of getting the new brother to learn about the law, about the items that he's studying. I also think that we have a lot of opportunities for, one of the things I've always said is we need to go to a local theater company or a high school theater program and get the teacher to come out and teach us how to do basic acting stuff for the 3rd degree drama. Just basic, even though they don't know the script or whatever, just some basic pointers that would help us to improve that. We have actually there's a guy in my lodge whose daughter teaches high school theater. And I keep saying, why don't we just have her come and, give us some pointers on how to do this? There are a lot of people out there, a lot of opportunities of people who are not necessarily Masons or who are, that we could get to come in who are actual experts on these things and already teach about them. And we never seem to avail ourselves of that. There you go.
Yeah.
David's nodding his head, so I will declare myself the winner.
Yeah, I would agree. There was something I read at one point that said, why not recruit that drama teacher to be a Mason, right? Why not if you need some help with that, why not go out and try and find a drama teacher, basically, or try and hey, who do you know that? Who do you know that? Who do you know? I know we're not supposed to recruit, but that was the kind of the idea of it. But yeah, and I don't think that there's too much. I don't know that would be something you would open the lodge to do, but why not have a Saturday afternoon luncheon, so to speak, and have a regional event, and you could talk about dramatic effect of things. Absolutely, they could certainly put on a workshop. I think it'd be great, and that's good education. And it can be applied directly to, like you said, directly to what we're doing. So I think that's good core. Now, do I think that an apprentice should be there? I don't know. Maybe if he wants to be there. Obviously, they're not going to. If it's a non-Mason, they're not going to be talking about specifics of degrees or things. But I don't think that should be on. Let's say you had that once a year. Once a year, the local drama teacher would come in and talk to you about dramatic effect. Should they go to that? I don't think it should be on their priority list. If they want to go and there's time, sure, couldn't hurt. But I don't think that in my checklist of things that I want that new apprentice to learn, it wouldn't be in the top 5 or 10 or whatever. And I think do we really even have a checklist of things we want? We do, because it's in the mentor's guide. Here's the things we want you to do. We want you to go to visit 3 meetings. We want you to go see 3 lodge or 3 degrees. We want you to see not the 3 degrees, but 3 different degrees. We want you to do these certain things. There's actually a checklist of things that are recommended for an apprentice or a new Mason to go and do. But do we incorporate those in our lodges? I don't know.
That I'm just going to say that sounds like something possibly to be discussed when we discuss the next section. Because that, in my opinion, that falls more under the other than education.
Sure.
More in the, providing quality of something.
Yeah.
Than, making sure that someone knows, because with that kind of stuff, that's where you're getting into the more nuances, more of the nuances of a lodge, and less of the meat and potatoes that you need to know in order to effectively participate in lodge.
Yes, it's funny that Matt went into that section on architects, because that was actually where my finger was. That's exactly where I wanted to go back to when we came on this. And my comment was, not committees appointed by the Grand Master every year. So the experts, the architects, may not be your committee men, even though there's a few committees out there that are made of people like I think originally the finance committee was finance oriented people, accountants, whatever. The real estate committee is made up mostly of real estate related folks. Is the research education committee made up of professors and scholars and theologians? Nope, because I'm on it. So yeah, should there? Yeah, and maybe that committee shouldn't exist in that fashion. Maybe it should be a requirement to be, hey, if you want to be on the research education committee, I'm just picking on that one, but on a committee, you should be the professional in that arena. Maybe.
Yeah, at least have some general aptitude for it. Yeah.
I also agree with the immediately following the next paragraph, when he talks about our working tools, and what kind of relates to what we were talking about before is that we douse them and deluge them with information, and hour-long sessions, 20-minute lectures and 30-minute sessions of things. And it's just like, oh my gosh, by the time we're getting ready to do a first degree, and I'm trying to bring in new people, new guys to be part of different things. And I offhandedly say, don't worry about it. By the time we get to that part, he won't remember anything anyway. he'll be so overwhelmed with the experience that they won't remember that, necessarily. Now they might. What I do say is that there are key elements that I think people should look through the degree work or look through the work and say, especially things that are brought up in a lecture. There are certain key elements that are brought up in a lecture to remind them of what they experienced. And so for those kind of things, I think are important to make sure get done properly, because if they're not done properly, then when we talk about them later and they go, this happened to you, this happened to you, and they go, no, that didn't happen to me. But I digress a little bit. So the idea, I wrote down bite-sized pieces. I've ventured into the land of LinkedIn learning. Have you ever done any of that stuff? And it might be half an hour or an hour's worth of information, but it's little 2 to 3 minute segments, and it kind of transitions from one segment to the next. And so you can finish a segment. If you need to move on to something else, you come back to it. You don't have to figure out where you were in that. And then after about 3 or 4 sessions, 10 to 15 minutes, there's a little quiz, maybe 2, 3 questions, 1, 2, 3 questions, to kind of make sure you understood. You can continue on without passing the questions, but it just helps to solidify the information that you just learned about. So why isn't Masonic education in that similar fashion? We give them a little bit of information, have them take a little bit of a test. Again, not really a test, just, hey, check in your knowledge. And why couldn't we have that available on our Grand Lodge websites in a secure folder with education information? No argument. I guess
we all agree with ourselves too much.
Yes.
Uh-oh, here we go.
Well, no, but my concern would be that how much, okay, so 60 years ago, the amount of Masonic information that was available to everyone was limited. We didn't have the internet. You couldn't just order a book and have it delivered within 2 days. There weren't that many books, so the amount of information that is available now is significantly larger, both good and bad, more bad than good. But I think I always worry about breaking things down into too small a point. Like when we talk about digestible, the 2 minutes and stuff. And I guess my question is that Grand Lodge's should Grand Lodge be in the business of creating, quizzes? Like, is that really something we should be working on our spending our time and money and effort doing? Or is it not better just to have someone guiding them with saying, you could have a list of books to read? Well, we do on our Grand Lodge website. There's a very lengthy list of books on Masonic information you can get. I worry that we're getting too institutionalized in that, and would be that my worry with that one is that we're turning ourselves more into an education, a school, and not so that people sort of get the idea that well, I've gone through and I've done these quizzes and I've checked everything off and now I'm a good Mason. Whereas it's more important to have explore stuff on your own and see what clicks with you. I'm not sure if I'm being
No, I would agree. I mean, but I think we talk about our Masonry being a mystery school, essentially, right? And so, Scottish Rite markets themselves as the University of Masonry.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah, which I understand, and I don't think that should. I have a whole other opinion about Scottish Rite. Now that we've talked about those in the past, but I do think that there should still be some basic core level of education. And he even talks about it in the next section, Winding Stairs Part 4. He says we need to discard about 9/10 of our curricular materials. And I said, stick to the core. I totally agree with you. I think that there's almost too much information out there. And so I think what could happen and can happen is that guy comes in and we don't give him bread. We give him a stone or don't give him anything. And then he thinks he has to go out and find it. And maybe I'm talking about myself and my lodge in particular, but I know some lodges do better, but I also know lodges that don't do what we do, which is still pretty limited. So if there was, and that's where I think the Grand Lodge could step in, if you will, to provide some kind of core. Now, yeah, I agree. It shouldn't be you finish these 3 books or 3 lessons in this, you get this degree, and now you're a perfect Master Mason. No, I'm not about giving out diplomas and that kind of stuff. I do like a patent when you become a Mason. That's kind of cool, but not to achieve a certain level of education necessarily.
Right.
But I think there should be a core so that when you say, you go and talk to a fellow craft Mason, or he's about to get his degree in as a Master Mason, you have a pretty good idea of what he knows or should know as a fellow craft Mason. And I get the lodges should be able to do what they want to do. And so, but again, I think there should be a somewhat level of standard that the lodges and Grand Lodge could help with that. It doesn't have to be high, lofty information and super esoteric, just kind of basic core information. This is what we think you should know as an apprentice. This is what we think we should know as a fellow craft. This is what we think we should know as a Master Mason. And then beyond that, it's up to them and the lodge and what other organizations they might want to be part of.
I think my stumbling point is I call that a prove up, because that's what you need to know to before you move on to the next degree. You have to be able to explain what you learned in the preceding one.
But are they really understanding it or just reciting?
I didn't say okay. No one understands this. I mean, this is, I guess, my thing is that they need to learn before they can understand. You won't understand right away. It's going to be, I think it's going to be years before anyone totally understands everything they went through. And you only get that by going through and watching the degrees as a spectator.
Okay.
I guess you can't really watch the degrees as a candidate, but you know, and we have,
Yeah.
and I guess it's weird because up here, as I said, we have the Ashlar College, which is literally like, and there's different paths you can do through it. There's self-guided. There's, you know, here are the courses you need to take to, and it's very well laid out and stuff. So that's why I think that basic education is your proof up. This is what you need to know to be a Mason. This is what you need to know to move on to your next degree. I never expect it. I never expect a new Mason to fully understand everything, even before they go on to the next degree, because there's so much information there to understand. And you don't, until you get a ritual book, you don't have 100% of everything anyway. And I always say, like, whenever a new Mason comes up and he says, "Oh, what book should I read?" And I always say, your ritual. Know your ritual. That is the basic, bare bones. That is what we are. It's contained in the ritual. The more you read it, the more you'll understand it. So maybe we're saying the same thing, and we're just talking circularly. But I don't know if you, because I don't think an entered apprentice can understand everything that happens, everything from an entered apprentice degree before they move on to their fellow craft. They can know it, but I don't think they'll ever totally understand it right at that point.
Yes.
Woohoo!
And again, yeah, I'm not trying to say that we should teach them the depth of information about what happened to them in the first degree. It's just we used to call it the New Canada Education Program, and now it's kind of floundering in its terminology because nobody really knows what to call it. But I think it's going to be called the first degree education or second degree education. And there is a booklet, if you will, of more background about what happened to you and what you may be thinking about and that kind of stuff. And so it's a, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, 50 pages. It's just like I say a pamphlet, it's more of a small booklet, but I don't know how many pages it is offhand, but it's some additional background. And I think there are some questions at the end, again, to help you. So, well, what does this mean? And you can kind of go back to the information and kind of learn about it. And yes, I would agree that if you're learning a catechism, you probably should be trying to understand it a little bit as well. But I think a lot of times it's just focus on get the memory work done so you can move on to the next degree. And not so much the somewhat comprehension. Again, I totally agree that people, I mean, I've been at this 14, 15 years and I still don't know a lot, even though we do a podcast and pretend like we do.
Well, and there's things like I've brought up in Lodge before about the words and stuff, and there's things that happen in the following degrees that bring more light to stuff that happened in the preceding degrees. So yes, that's why I say until you've gone all the way, until you've gone through the 3 degrees, you know, you trying to understand it is good, but you won't fully understand it because you don't have all the information. Yeah. But I also I'm very firm in my belief that lodges need to have some sort of education, and education that isn't just someone standing up and talking about a famous Freemason, because that doesn't cut it anymore.
Yes,
especially one that's been dead for 200 years.
Yeah, and is like, you know, well, okay, yeah, how does that reflect on us? You know.
Yes. How can you apply that idea? I think that should, you know, one of the 3 to 5 questions I'm going to have is how can we apply this, or how does it affect me? Yeah, for sure. And like you said, the lodge has to be committed. That was my last comment in here, was that the lodge must be involved and committed to the process. For sure.
So no more past masters rolling their eyes when we come around to the education portion of the evening. I was like, oh God, not again.
I already know that.
Well, and the thing is that it's not for the most part. I mean, I don't know how the makeup of your lodge is. I mean, ours is predominantly made up of past masters, and for the most part, the education really isn't for them anyway. Like if there's a new piece, if there's something they didn't know, that's great. But we're like, at least my year that I've been doing it, I've been gearing it to the new members.
In the sphere of influence that I work in, many of us that are past masters don't have enough education, and we still need it, though. I think some guys get through the East and they don't really know any of the answers, which I don't. I mean, I fully admit have been learning more now in the last 10 years than I have in the first 5 years. Supposedly when I got to the East, I was all knowledgeable. Well, no, I could open a lodge and close a lodge and run the meeting, but I didn't know a lot of the stuff. Yeah. And on that, I was just talking with some guys. We had a Saturday morning breakfast on the first Saturday to get together, and a few of us were having kind of a meeting after the meeting, and I was talking about how I would like to have, while I really enjoy our meetings after the meetings, we kind of complain and moan and groan about things over and over and over and over again. And sometimes we get resolution on some things and we come to a conclusion or build a method to fix it or whatever. It happens. But what I said to him, one of the guys, we have a new Mason that came from I call the Middle East, from Michigan out, and he's now part of our lodge. And he said we should get together and talk, master masons, past masters, whatever, maybe make it like a past officers club or something, and talk about things. And it's an exclusive thing. And we were really talking about trying to develop a long-term financial pot. So if we all give $20 and there's 10 of us, that happens every month, there'd be, $4,000 or $5,000 at the end of the year that we could start. And this would become a seed money. And I said, what I'd really like to do at that meeting, though, instead of just kind of BSing, is let's have a real topic, a real discussion about something. Let's talk about a word or a part of masonry, and not just commiserate about Howard can't get guys to participate or whatever, or how that degree didn't go well, or how a lot of things we talk about here. Let's have a real discussion about some mysteries. And in my mind's eye, I think that's what Masons in the past used to do. I know that they had a great time in their festive boards and they would drink and be merry, but in my mind's eye, they still had these discussions about how to make themselves better or how to implement the ideas that we learned in Masonry. And so that I feel like we're missing that.
So two things. First thing, did you guys start putting $20 a month into a pot?
So it was just an idea, but he did follow up with an email. And so we're going to start it. The weekend he proposed was a lodge leadership retreat. I said, you're welcome to come along, but we're going to be in lodge leadership retreat. But I love the idea. And I said, we don't have to be there. I mean, Bill and I didn't, it was the two of us, we don't have to be there. You could still do it and have the other past masters coming together and start this. It doesn't have to be us. And Bill and I were just smiling because we were excited. By the way, he's Matt's fanboy, Bill Stefani. I think he listens. So hi, Bill, if you're listening.
Heaven help him.
We were kind of looking at each other and smiling and talking afterwards, saying, oh, it's so nice to have somebody else coming in with an idea and want to do something and participate and be proactive about it, and not kind of expecting us to do it. And so we were like, yeah, where's my billows? Get that flame going. Yeah.
So my second half of my question is, well, it's not a question, it's a statement. It's another soapbox issue for me. There are enough Masons out there who are just not interested in the kind of education we're talking about. I mean, I'm sad that they are not interested, but they're not, and they're never going to be. And if you start having a half-hour long discussion in lodge about whatever, they're not going to be interested. Although apparently, according to this article that we're reading, you're going to need to get chairs up from the basement if you start doing this. But I actually, one of my grandiose ideas that I've never carried through with is to form the Masonic Education Society of South Snohomish County, so that it could be MESS with 3 S's, because that I think would exemplify the organization. And just have those Masons who are interested in that sort of thing get together and talk outside of lodge. I would rather have it be in lodge. I would rather have lodge be edifying. But honestly, lodge is also a business meeting, right? And that's not that edifying in its own, just by its own nature. So,
but Canada fixes that, right, through their lodge officers meeting and the board of general purposes. That's the word.
Board of general. Well, yeah, except that nothing can be decided at a board of general purpose. It has to be brought before the lodge and voted on, or it's supposed to.
Sure, but it just streamlines the process, doesn't
Mhm.
it? We're all good Masons. Hope to last.
So, as we were talking, I had a thought, and my question is: when we talk about Freemasons in the past and in the early years of Freemasonry, they would get together and they would discuss new ideas and stuff. And it was a time of new ideas. I mean, the early 18th century, the Enlightenment, scientific method and stuff like that. Are we having an issue now because on average we are better educated and more knowledgeable about things than back then? Is that an issue why education is so hard for us? Because there isn't that thirst for knowledge that there once was, because it's force fed us for 12 years in school. I just wonder if that is that part of our problem.
Interesting.
That is interesting. I know I've contemplated before in my life that, it used to be whatever, Isaac Newton was into math and he's into physics and he was into spiritualism and he was into gematria. Was that Isaac Newton? And it doesn't matter. He was into like 55 different things, right? He was a polymath. He was not a focused on one thing. And nowadays, if you're going to be on the cutting edge of physics, you need to be, it's going to be the behavior of this particular subatomic particle, and you need a hadron collider to work on it, kind of thing. And I wonder if that's sort of the same thing. People are so specialized that and educated in certain areas that they don't. It's sort of the opposite of what you're saying, but I'm trying to agree with you.
Well, no, but it's not, because well, you think about it. Well, okay, so using physics, like when Isaac Newton was starting, physics was new. Like, so that it was this broad subject. And now 200 years later, so much of it has been discovered that in order to discover new things, you have to be focused. But what I'm saying is that, 200 or 300 years ago, the average person was lucky to get 2 or 3 years of education. Whereas now, I mean, we get 12 years of it. And most of us go on to university, and and the information that is available to us now is at so much greater than it was back then, that maybe that's why our discussions, and because we ban discussion of politics and religion and all that stuff, is maybe partially that's the reason why it is so difficult for us to have these discussions in lodge, is that maybe there's not much for us to discuss. And I agree, they're like going into the deep esoterica of the meaning of the beehive in lodge will glaze some people's eyes over, and may not edify people the way we think it should. So it was a thought that just occurred to me now.
But also having somebody that knows the deep nuances of the beehive and how that relates all. So my thought was maybe there was the Sir Isaac Newton that could come to lodge, and he was a member, and he would talk about all the fascinating things that he's discovering and whatever, and it might prompt us to learn more or just be fascinated with what he's discussing and describing. And so do you think there was 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 guys that were all kind of the Sir Isaac of their element, and they brought these cool ideas and that's what they're discussing? Or,
well, there is the common belief that the Royal Society was founded by a bunch of, like, there were a bunch of Masons in there. Like, so they were bright, intelligent guys that, would come together, and, the newest thought, that the newest humanist thought out from the continent, and they would discuss it. But, we can find that out easily ourselves. Like, and, we don't, nothing is that, I'm not saying there's nothing new in the world, but there's not a lot new that we can discuss deeply with, and this is going to go into the next section, is that I'm going to get in trouble on this one. The level of intellect of the average Mason is not conducive to deep philosophical or intellectual thinking sometimes.
that was going to be my question. That do we have that depth available to us? And then those that do have that, if I had a Jarrod in my lodge, we could easily.
Not if we all had a Jarrod in our lodge.
we could easily have some more deep discussions about things because we have that expert knowledge, if you will. And in our particular lodge, there's probably a couple of guys that have some more specific knowledge and more depth of knowledge like that. But a lot of us just have a more generalized knowledge of things and interest. But if we do, I don't think we can point to one person and say, oh yeah, he's the guy that has all the knowledge and it's so exciting to let him talk about things and we can have discussions and he opens. Maybe we have a couple guys, maybe that's a little more like that. I just didn't know if you thought that was obviously they sat around, they had drinks and they had meals and all that kind of stuff, and then they had some discussion, but it wasn't about how their horse broke down that day and the wagon, or is it, and why can't they get guys to come to the dinner, or was it about, like you were saying, the ideas of this is what I discovered today, this is what I learned today, this is how I was a better person today, whatever. I know we're
if you believe the histories that they were bringing, because they were correspondence circles, and they would be bringing, like, hey, I got the letter from Rousseau in France, and he's got this strange idea I thought I'd bring before the lodge, and we discuss it. So I don't know. I mean, it was just, as I said, it was just something that occurred to me as we were talking.
And an equally valid thing that I think would be really cool discussion to have and I think it'd be hard to do in lodge. You need to do it in a less formal setting. Is I'm having this problem in my life. How can I apply the tools of masonry to this thing? I'm a new master mason and I've never encountered this problem before. And I think, I mean, that takes a level of bonding with your brothers that, I mean, you don't want to, that's not what you're going to bring up in open lodge in front of 3 visitors and whatever. That's the discussion that I think would make people better people, if you will.
Yes.
But yeah. So there you go. Having had the first word and the last word, I think it's about time to wrap us up again. So again, I'm Matt Appel, and on behalf of Jarrod and David and the absent Steve, we thank you all for listening to the Working Tools podcast, and we look forward to talking to you again next time. Goodbye.